Okay, so this week we're talking about one-shot films, right?
Yeah, the oneers.
The oneers. Well, it depends where you want to go with this, because there are a number of films which mimic this.
Oh, I've kind of included those.
Okay, cool. Yes, I mean, same.
At least one of them.
Yeah.
If the whole film is intended to feel like one single take, then I've included it, even if there are 6, for example, 1917.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, and the same with Rope as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a reasonably recent innovation to be able to physically do this.
Yeah.
So having it broken up makes a lot more sense in the past.
I think it was Birdman. They said they wouldn't have been able to do that until that point. They wouldn't have been able to make that film until that point because the technology, the kind of hardware wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because you've got battery issues and lighting and cables, and how do you, like, the mechanics of it are really intense.
I rewatched Russian Ark recently, and looking into the background of them making it, it sounds like an absolute nightmare. And the technology was sort of there, but it also wasn't, in the sense that they're following the Steadicam operator around with a physical hard drive.
It's not ideal, is it?
Yeah, exactly. They're sort of like messing
It's
together
like
different
spooling
bits and
out
pieces.
tape reels as they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and also Russian Ark, the sound was all post.
Right, which helps.
I think one of the things that he said in making that was that you could just hear him swearing too much in the actual take.
That makes sense. I mean, that kind of reminds me of, did you see One Cut of the Dead?
No, I didn't see that one. No.
So this is a film that Nick Wynn has been trying to get me to watch for, honestly, years. But because it's a zombie film, I was like, I don't like zombie films. And he was like, it's not a zombie film. I'm like, it's got Of the Dead in the title. I think it's going to be a zombie film. And I finally watched it this week, and it is a zombie film. It is one take. I don't want to spoil it because there's kind of a twist.
Okay.
But there are things that happen in the first section of the film, which is one take, that feel a bit off, that you're like, oh, that's a bit awkward, and maybe the acting isn't that good, or there's this weird pause where there shouldn't be. And then when you find out why later, it's brilliant. It's one of those you want to go back and rewatch it afterwards to see all the things, because it's all intentional.
Oh, so using the medium as a red herring almost.
Yeah, it's really interesting film about filmmaking, and
Okay.
yeah, I highly recommend it. And they made it on no money, but they really lent into that. You don't feel like anything's lacking because it works for the format. The total opposite to a film like 1917, where they built like 5 miles of set or something ridiculous.
Is that the highest budget one of this type of film?
Oh, it must be. It must
Can't
be.
think of anything which even comes close.
Even just Roger Deakins is going to make it. And the cast in it. The cast is insane for 1917.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've got a budget of $90 to $100 million on that.
What did it make?
Basically 500 million. So it did well.
Okay. Well,
That's an example of taking it to the absolute limit in terms of technology, production, and how many takes did they do on that?
I thought it was like 6 shots. Actually, it turns out it was like over 20.
Oh, okay.
It's still, I've had conversations with people about it since it came out where they go, oh yeah, it's not a single shot though. I'm like, oh, fuck off. Like, look at what they did. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's irresponsible at a certain point to make it a single shot if you're spending $100 million. Right? Like, if you're doing this budget indie zombie film and
then fine, yeah.
things kind of fuck up a bit, and you're like, oh, we got to do it again, then it's like, yeah, fine. If you're pissing $5 million down the drain per shot, then you know what I mean?
You're going to have some questions that need answering after all
that. Yeah. Well, because if you start breaking it down and thinking of it, like, if you go to like a very expensive restaurant and
I've heard of those, yeah.
You take a bite of food and you're like, that was 20 quid. The same thing with doing a shot on these films, right? Everything is packed into that one shot, right? The entire budget.
When you were saying it's very irresponsible, I thought you meant from a safety perspective, because it's an action film, right? There are really dangerous scenes.
Oh, in so many different ways.
And so to do an entire 2-hour film, to prove it? Like, why? I remember watching it at the cinema, and I don't love war films generally, and I was blown away by it. We've had this conversation before, but I loved it because it didn't glorify war, and that surprised me.
Sure.
And
have you seen Thin Red Line, by the way?
No, I haven't seen that one.
I watched it recently just on the subject of war films that don't glorify war. I was thinking of it in comparison with 1917 in that it's the opposite of a one-shot film, in that he shot so much footage to the point that Adrian Brody thought he was going to be the lead of the film. And when the film came out, he has basically no lines. He's in shots in a way where you think, oh, this is weird that this guy's being framed so centrally at points.
Yeah.
But he just re-edited the whole thing in post to be something completely different to what they thought they were making.
Adrian Brody must have been gutted.
Yeah, I don't think he was particularly happy. He's done all right, though.
He has done all right. The opposite of that is Kieran Culkin, who, when they were filming Home Alone, didn't know. He was 5 years old, so fair enough, but he didn't know until they went to the cinema to see it afterwards that Macaulay Culkin was the star.
Oh, yeah.
He thought they were just both in it for some shots, and that was it. It's like, oh, you were. This is your film. Okay. Didn't know that.
Oh, bless him.
Very cute. Wait, what was I saying about 1917 with... Yeah, the stitching together. So
Yes.
Yes. If I'm reading a book and I can see where the narrative beats are happening, if they haven't been hidden, it's not a problem, but it's less impressive.
Sure.
And so with 1917, I knew that there were multiple shots and I was kind of looking for them. And there are a couple of obvious ones, like moving from inside the trenches to inside more of a building, and there's a bit of shadow and you can tell there's a cut. But after the first two, it just doesn't matter.
It's about capturing a feeling,
Yeah.
right? It's a constrained feeling that you're trying to put across. So Birdman does that. Rope does that as well. It was back, Rope in the 60s that they did that?
70, say?
Oh my God. Rope is 1948.
No, wow.
Yeah, 48. Wow. I was way later in my head with that.
Yeah, I guess I thought it was later because the version that I watched had been colorized.
Right, okay.
That doesn't really make sense when I think about Jimmy Stewart
Yeah.
being in it. It's like, probably was in the 70s.
Yeah, that's a... When did colour come into film?
Oh...
What year was that?
We should know that.
Yeah, that feels like a big landmark that should immediately be...
I feel like end of the 60s. That's my guess.
But wait, so Psycho is black and white, right? But
Yeah.
it's in an era where that was a choice.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying, when did colour TV come out? In the UK, 67. Yeah, so late 60s.
Okay, late 60s. Because obviously you start looking into this and there's lots of examples of, there was a colour print in 1901 and it's like, but that's not...
Yeah, because someone painted it.
Yeah, exactly. That's not actually mass market. So so late 60s is when it was really transitioning over. Okay, cool.
But you'd mentioned Rope before and I hadn't actually seen it until recently. And knowing the setup, I was surprised at how tense it still is. But it's also so camp. I love that era of just like men getting really close to each other and being like, well, what do you think of this thing?
Well, and that's one where there is a very obvious homosexual plot going on, which is not, you can't state that outwardly. I actually watched something the other day where they were talking about Ben-Hur, where the guy playing opposite Ben-Hur, oh my God, I forget his name, but the guy playing opposite Charlton Heston was instructed by the director, play it gay.
Yeah, but
right?
don't tell Charlton.
Don't tell Charlton, because Charlton will lose his mind.
Yeah.
And you watch it back and it's a very gay film.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's like deep in Hays Code, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. A very, very different time. Rope is an adaptation of a play, which, just for anyone who hasn't seen Rope, the basic setup, and this is not a spoiler because this happens in the first scene, is that there's these two guys who murder their friend and put him in a trunk in the middle of the room just before a dinner party with all of their friends coming over. And so there's this dead body in a trunk in the middle of the room, like a coffee table, the entire time. And there's this unbelievable, wonderful tension for the rest of the film. And then you've got Jimmy Stewart going around going, oh, what's going on here? Like,
My favourite.
I'm on to them. Which is just wonderful. But it does play like a play, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some of these recent... We haven't even got on to...
Philip Barantini.
Is it Barantini? Yeah, exactly.
Which is the whole reason why we want to talk about these.
Yeah. And his stuff is so far away from feeling like a play in that sense, in that staged sense. But it does... I mean, I've heard Stephen Graham talking about the fact that they wanted to capture that nexus point of feeling like a play.
Are you talking about Adolescence or Boiling Point?
Both. Okay. Same thing, that they were capturing that nexus point between feeling like a play and having that film naturalistic acting in it. So it's sort of the best of both worlds.
Which they do so well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm really interested as to your take on Boiling Point and Adolescence.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we had talked about doing an episode on single shot films before Adolescence came out.
Yeah. And then it's this huge thing.
Yeah, because Boiling Point, I thought, was such an interesting example of not only that kind of production and what can be done with film, but also, you know, going back to indie filmmaking compared with blockbuster, the fact that Boiling Point was made in March 2020.
Yes.
And so they had the budget and they had the set, the restaurant, because it was a real restaurant that they'd made some changes to I think the restaurant was undergoing construction. They could move walls around and that kind of thing. They had it for 8 days. He always does 2 shots per day. So that was 16 takes for them to
Same with Adolescence,
get it right.
right?
Yeah, 2 shots a day, exactly.
Yeah.
So March 2020, they did the first day. So they had 2 takes. And then the producers came to them and were like, you've got tomorrow. And that's it.
Yeah.
So they only got 4. And you could really feel it. I was talking to someone recently about it and they were like, oh, but do you not think it was good? I was like, I thought it was amazing. I thought Boiling Point was brilliant. But there are moments you can see that if they had had those extra days, would have been ironed out, would have been tightened, would have been filled in a little bit. You know, there's the bit where the guy from the kitchen walks out to the car where like nothing really happens and then comes back again. And
what was the intention of that?
My guess was that they really needed to get the makeup done for the allergic reaction.
Because I really felt like there was going to be some purpose to that later on.
Yeah, but no, I felt like it was okay, this thing happens and we'll probably work something out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I
also felt like Boiling Point, I thought it was fantastic. I thought that Stephen Graham's performance was incredible, not just for his performance itself, but for how much space he gave everyone else. It really felt like he was supporting the other actors in their performances as much as he was doing his own thing, and it didn't feel contrived.
He may be one of the best actors of his generation, actually.
Sure.
Way under the radar in terms of doing anything huge until Adolescence, right?
I mean, he was in This Is England. That was pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, not big outside of the UK, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Right, yeah, I see. But I think he's also someone that's just has so much integrity, and going on to Adolescence, it's such a relief to know that these child actors, and particularly Owen Cooper, who plays Jamie, he's going to be supported in what is a very critical and potentially dangerous situation for him, being an untrained actor who doesn't have any connection to the industry, who's suddenly a star. The fact that Stephen Graham and Philip Barantini and Hannah Walters are there to support him gives me a lot of faith that he'll be okay. Yeah,
there's a media portrayal that people put up of themselves, and there's people that you think, oh, he's a really good guy, and it unfortunately sometimes eventually turns out that they're not, and that they have done shady shit.
Really? That happens?
Yeah, Neil Gaiman.
Oh, I wasn't ready for that. Still so sad about that.
But I mean, there's some people that you're 50-50 and they do seem like a bunch of very, very good people. And I mean, he's obviously, with This Is England as well, worked with a lot of young people on those productions.
Yeah, and even when Jodie Comer won the BAFTA, I think it was, for Killing Eve, in her acceptance speech, she talks about a lot of things, and then she talks directly to Stephen Graham and thanks him for what he did for her, and was so moved. And you can see, and then the camera goes on him and he's welling up, and you're just like, you're such a good guy. You can just see how much he cares about underrepresented voices in a way that a lot of productions and people working in productions say that they do, but then don't follow through with that.
Yeah. He's made some fantastically socially conscious work as well with, I mean, because I think Adolescence was, roughly speaking, out of his mind, right?
He definitely co-created, yeah.
Yeah, he worked with a writer on it, but I think I saw Jack Thorne talking to some people about it the other day, about the writing process. It was brought to him as an idea by Stephen Graham, and then they sort of fleshed it out together.
Interesting. Yeah, because Philip Barantini met him as an actor on Band of Brothers. Because Philip Barantini, the director, was an actor first.
Oh!
Yeah, one of the reasons that he talks about being able to make Boiling Point was the combination of having been an actor for so long that he knew a lot of people, like crew.
Right, okay.
But also because as an actor, he had to have another job. And so he worked as a chef.
Oh, wow.
And he basically ended up working as eventually a Michelin star, like sous chef. And then it was through that he came up with Boiling Point. And Boiling Point was a short first and then the feature.
Well, there was a TV show after as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't watch that. I didn't love the ending of Boiling Point. I thought it felt like a little bit of a cop-out.
Wow, same.
Yeah, that was the only bit. It didn't ruin it for me because I thought it was such a fantastic film aside from that. But I was so excited when I heard that Adolescence was coming out.
Yeah.
And that it was single shot episodes because it felt like, okay, finally he's going to have the budget, he's going to have the time, we're going to see what he can really do with that.
More of a playground, yeah. So the ending of Boiling Point,
spoiler,
as well as
I'm not going to spoil
I'm not going to spoil it. The ending of Boiling Point, as well as there is a beat earlier on with the pastry chef
and the boy.
Yeah, so where you see his arm.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
Okay, so I'm going to disagree on that. I'm also going to say I did not particularly like the last episode of Adolescence.
Oh, interesting.
I feel occasionally they veer into mawkish soap opera-y kind of moments. And they're so good at not doing that 99% of the time that when it happens, it just spoils it for me a little bit because it takes me out of it. Didn't see that one coming, did you?
I just felt like you were, and I appreciate how carefully you're expressing that. So I'm like, don't get defensive. I see what you mean. I felt that with Boiling Point for sure. The food critic, for example.
Oh, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Compared with the guy from Health and Safety, which was such a brilliant raising the stakes piece, to have this guy, the last person you want to come to the restaurant arriving. The food critic was like, I don't know, it was good, but it wasn't.
Comparing her, the food critic, and her role in the piece.
It was a guy, wasn't it? It's the guy from Lockstock.
No. So he's a chef who Stephen Graham's character used to work for, and he's brought a critic with him. Comparing their plot, which does, I know what you mean, it takes you out of it a little bit because it makes it feel a little bit more contrived.
Yeah.
Whereas Table 7 that they go to early on, where that guy keeps talking about how expensive the bottle of wine he ordered is.
And the aggressions to the staff.
Yeah. But all of it just felt so real.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what frustrates me about the moments, and it is just moments mostly, that don't feel real or do feel a bit more soap opera-y that they include in this stuff. And it must be so unbelievably difficult as a writing exercise, as like a constrained writing exercise, to be putting across as much information as you want to within a one shot, right?
Yeah, I feel like I totally hear what you're saying, and there definitely are moments of that. I disagree with the pastry chef one though, because I think the reason it didn't feel contrived is Hannah Walters. Her performance sold that for me. I'm
not critical of or criticizing any of the actors.
Just from a writing perspective.
It's just the writing beat. Yeah, it's literally just the writing beat that takes me out of it for a second.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of what they could have done instead, or just have a different storyline?
But this is it, right? If you wanted to convey exactly the same thing in such a constrained way when you're doing it in that one-shot type thing, I don't know that I would have done it any differently to the way that they did it. I probably just wouldn't have included it. I would have done something different.
Yeah, do something else.
I would have done something completely
and that goes back to what we were saying about the guy that goes outside to the car. Like, why is that happening?
Yes. Same with the pastry chef's arms as well. I wondered if there was going to be a revisiting of some of those beats. It wasn't. It was just providing texture. Some one-shots, like Boiling Point, feel like, and like Birdman as well, actually, do feel kind of like Rube Goldberg machine type plots where everything that you see is so purposeful and it links together so well and it comes back so perfectly later on. It all just works in that kind of best script ever kind of way. I actually went to see Birdman twice at the cinema. I loved Birdman.
Yeah,
I think part of that is the soundtrack as much as anything, though. That constant thrumming, drumming the whole way through fits the one shot so well because you're constantly in that space with them. You're in that sense of tension. Barantini's stuff is more slice of life, though, right?
Yeah, and I think what we've seen with Adolescence is a building on that has made me even more excited for whatever he does next, because what you're saying about the soap opera beats, I do see it, and I feel like for me there was a moment, but then it goes back to this intentionality of it. In Adolescence, the second episode in the school, there's a line where the female police officer says something about being frustrated that it's all about him, it's never about the victims, it's always about the perpetrator. And it just came off a little out of place and a little cheesy and on the nose, and I was a bit jarred by it, but not enough to be bothered. I felt like that episode for me was the weakest one, just because of...
Oh, interesting.
It felt slightly too stretched. There was a lot of walking where other things could have been happening because they were having to cover so much ground.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of friends and family who are teachers, and people working in schools have found that episode particularly difficult because in their experience, that's not how schools deal with it much better than that. And they're really portrayed as this, and it won't be the same in all schools, but teachers put in so much work to combating what is happening on phones and social media. And it didn't even touch on that. It was very much like, running around after the kids and, oh no, things are bad. Whereas they would have had counselling, they would have had the school shut, they would have had all of these things that they didn't have, that wasn't shown. But you can kind of suspend disbelief for the purposes of the work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that line where she says about the victims felt a bit jarring. And then for me...
Well, it's straight out of a newspaper article, right?
It was, yeah. But then interestingly, and I'm keen to hear why you didn't like the last episode, for me, the fact that the last episode focused on Jamie's family was a direct link to her saying that, because when you hear her say that, you're like, yeah, of course, it should be about the victim. But it's important, if we're going to change, the ills of society, it's the perpetrators that we need to examine and understand.
There's two ways of looking at that, right? In terms of the perpetrators that we need to look at and understand, because there's a historical focusing on the perpetrators
in like a glorification.
Yeah, for such different reasons.
Yeah. But like true crime.
Yes. Yeah, but there was always a thing where the advice to news broadcasts when there was a mass murder or a serial killer or a school shooting or any of those sorts of situations was don't have flashing lights on the broadcast that you put out. Don't have the killer's name repeated and images of them put up as this anti-hero looking kind of character, because they would do these things on the news all the time. And then you would immediately see copycats.
Yeah, like sensationalizing it.
Exactly. And I mean, turning serial killers from the past into the Jeffrey Dahmer TV series, and they become these cult figures. Yeah. Manson as a cult figure as well. Yeah. And I think that's why I liked the second episode a lot, is because I was so surprised by where they went with it. I thought first episode was kind of what it was going to continue on from the whole way through. I had no idea.
Yeah, I expected.
Yeah. And it was such a jarring sudden, like, oh, we're in a school now? This is interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it was going to be we go forward and then we go backwards, but it just keeps jumping forwards. I thought that was fantastic. I think to see the impact. Also, I'd heard that the last episode was about the family, and I assumed it was the girl's family. So I was really surprised that it was not, and I thought that was done so well. And I felt like, yeah, I want to hear what you didn't you didn't like.
Yeah, of course. So the first thing was, it immediately just took me to, we need to talk about Kevin.
I've not seen that.
Like, I don't think I've actually seen the film, but I read the book a long time ago. And that has been explored before in a very different way, obviously. We need to talk about Kevin is the mother of a school shooter. And we explore her life looking back on raising him as a kid, now that her life has been absolutely destroyed several years on from the actual school shooting. I think Tilda Swinton played the mother in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, I felt like that element of it had been covered before. That's not a big problem. The big problem for me that I had is that in soap operas, it is such a common beat to have something sad happened on Christmas. Something sad happened on my birthday.
Yeah. It didn't
because
need
it's a
to
birthday.
Be,
it's so much worse.
Yeah.
Like I just it's so much sadder. It feels manipulative.
Yeah, I get that.
And whenever I feel manipulated in the moment watching something, it immediately puts me into a defensive space of like, I don't like this. I don't like feeling so obviously manipulated.
That's interesting, because it's true that if you took the birthday element out,
I've got a lot less problem.
And it's just a normal day.
I've got a lot less problem then.
Yeah. It does land in a different way. Yeah. I guess they needed a reason for Jamie to send in the card. But he could have just called. They didn't need the card.
Didn't need the
He could have
card.
just called.
That's another thing with Barantini stuff where I think he avoided it completely with the first 3 episodes. Actually saying that, second episode and last episode are probably guilty of this. Boiling Point is guilty of this as well. Overstuffing.
Really?
I think so. Yeah. And you said it yourself about the second episode. They're sort of...
But I thought the opposite. I thought there wasn't enough in it.
In the second episode?
Yeah, in the school.
They meet so many people in the school. They're place to place to place. They could have spent so much longer focusing on the best friend character, for example.
I see. I think we're seeing the same problem, but from different ends, because I felt like they were jumping around so much, but I expected there to be more in the spaces between. Like, I wasn't seeing it as it's a problem jumping around. I was seeing it as a problem that we're not getting anything in those traveling moments where you could have run into a fight, or you could have overheard someone, or there's a kid talking about something that they catch, or a teacher runs into them, or anything like that just to ease that transition. Like, there's a bit in classically rogue reference, but Fawlty Towers.
Okay.
They spent so much time in the writing of Fawlty Towers trying to make the bits between the jokes funny. And it's one of the reasons that you watch an episode of Fawlty Towers now and you feel like, oh yeah, it's the one about the Kippers, or it's the one about the dead body, or one about the Germans. And then when you watch it, suddenly there's actually 5 other episodes in there that you've forgotten were that episode, because it's so
jam-packed.
It's so dense. Yeah, completely packed. And so I felt like we got that in the first one because there's so much tension. The only point where we don't is the drive to the police station.
Yes.
And I thought they handled that brilliantly, because it's the first time you get the score. All of the sound drops out. We're just with Jamie. We're just with Ashley Walters. We're waiting with them. And I felt like that was fine because of where we are in the journey of the episode. But then in the second episode, when that happens, when we're just walking around the school, less so. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
You know, his son that comes to talk to him about emojis, which was a brilliant scene. Have him try to catch him a few more times. Have him interact with Ryan a few more times. We see Ryan twice. Again, like you say, Jade, we could have spent so much longer with her and had that build. Like, we see that they're capable of doing that in the third episode, which I think was the best, with the psychologist.
Yeah. The first episode and the third episode feel like they made the best use of the format, of the idea of a one-shot.
Yeah.
Right? Because the second episode, that investigation could conceivably have taken place across a course of weeks.
Yeah.
They could have been in and out of the school. You could have easily restructured that in such a way that it was a regular episode of television and we're seeing the interactions with the school, but a one-shot is not maybe the most sensible thing to do for that particular episode. And the last episode as well, like, again, it feels a little contrived in terms of, okay, now this has happened, now we have to go here, now we have to come back. I like the way they did it. I think it was very impressive. Everything they did was super impressive. All of the acting was super impressive. The first episode, boy picked up, taken to police station, charged, and the ending, fantastic. And it made such good use of that idea of a one-shot.
That tension.
Yes, and that tension. And as you say, in the car, being in it, being with him, I was never bored. Not for a second. The third episode, I was never bored. Not for a second. We're in one room, 2 people talking for 90% of the episode. Never bored. And always in it with them in whatever moment they were in. Second and fourth episode, less so. A lot less so. Could have been regular episodes of television.
I see what you mean about the second episode and the way that the inquiry could have taken a lot longer than we see in a single shot. And actually, if they did want to stick to the single shot, then it could have been an assembly. It could have been a contained scene where, you know, we move through the audience of all the kids and we're hearing different things and we're seeing what the teachers are doing and then we're going back onto the stage. And there was a way to do that maybe that was more contained. With the final episode, it was very impressive. I feel like actually having that drive where you get a bit of backstory about the parents and you see the relationship with the daughter, and then also being at the hardware store and this other incel guy was so important. And I'm not sure how you would have done that differently. And for me, oh my god, just the ending was so heartbreaking. I think it's a really, and going back to what you were saying about we need to talk about Kevin, it doesn't bother me that it's being revisited because there are still shooters, there are still incels, and I think this was done in a way that has got people talking and has got people really considering the impact that this culture is having and this question of responsibility. I thought it was such an amazing conversation between the two parents of, you know, we did our best, but then coming around to being like, but we could have done more and we should have done more. And I thought that was a really good question to ask because he's a boy and he wasn't safe.
Yeah. It takes what they did in Boiling Point and steps it up in that first episode. And that third episode is kind of more like a bottle episode of a TV show in a lot of ways.
Yeah, true.
Which is great. And it's a fantastic episode. But the first episode in particular is it's taking that that thesis of a one-shot film and using it in such a perfect way.
Mm-hmm.
And the final episode, it felt like a lot of coincidences and things sort of falling on the same day, more so than the first one, which is like we have such a specific purpose for why we're doing it this way.
Yeah, because it could have been, if it's not his birthday, it could have been that the first thing that happens is the daughter sees the van. And then the whole day is about that and it's about tracking down these boys and finding out who did it and going and speaking to the neighbours. And there was a way to do that wasn't quite so, like you say, soap opera.
And you can encounter incel characters very easily in that plot line, right?
Yeah, true.
Do you see the reflections of Jamie in other kids who are around the neighbourhood? Like, it doesn't exist just in him.
Yeah, true.
Like, there's an interesting thing there to do, right? Which they didn't really go into too much. Again, there's so many... To have any kind of criticism of this is like
minor.
Is really nitpicking. Yeah, it really is nitpicking because you know I watched Russian Ark back and Russian Ark is fucking boring.
I don't know Russian Ark.
Russian film made in 2002, I think. One-shot film where they go around the Winter Palace.
Oh wow!
In St. Petersburg. It's a really interesting and smart use of the one-shot where you have a disembodied point of view camera perspective following around the Winter Palace. So it's all this like dense European stuff. And the implication is that this disembodied voice has died in some tragic accident.
Okay.
It winds through all of these different periods of Russian history, these moments that would have happened in the Winter Palace. And even at points, it goes into the Winter Palace as a modern museum.
Oh, wow.
They encounter people who are just wandering around it as a modern museum.
Did they just forget to close it off?
Oh, shit, pivot, improvise. Conceptually, it's great because it's almost like a museum tour with, I think there's like 2,000 actors in it. They go into certain rooms and there are hundreds of people and they're just sort of weaving their way through. And then they keep getting chucked out of places.
Okay.
And it's so conceptually, it's so good, but it's so fucking slow. And it's a shame. It's such a good concept and parts of it are so good. And it's a very early example of trying to do a one shot in recent times, but it doesn't use it to its full potential. Like Barantini has kind of distilled down, right? He's really figured out a way to, especially in Boiling Point and that first episode of Adolescence, to use it in such a smart way that keeps you riveted.
There's a reason for it. It's not a gimmick.
Exactly.
And that's something that even 1917
makes sense, like being in a war, being in the moment.
It's not just in
being
a war.
Being in real time.
It's real time. Exactly, it's real time. And the fact that that opening shot, the opening visual that we get is Schofield, except that behind him is Blake. And we are already with Schofield when Blake gets given the assignment and we see that Schofield is awake, but he doesn't want to be and he's not moving. And then he gets called up. He gets dragged into it. And there is no way that they could have told that story. They could have told it with cuts, but it wouldn't have had the same. It wouldn't have had the same impact. It just would. Yeah, it wouldn't have had the same impact. But I think with Adolescence, it would have completely destroyed it. It would have destroyed the tension. It would have destroyed the impact of it. The fact that you're holding your breath for these entire episodes.
Yes.
And for the third episode with the psychologist.
Oh, yeah.
You're right. It's kind of a bottle episode, but it was such a smart writing decision to have the guard because the fact that, if we had it without him, if we take, the guard with all the TV screens, if he's not there, it's about her and Jamie and that's it. But the fact that you have this older man who is constantly either mansplaining or flirting,
or leering over her shoulder,
leering behind her, not giving her a second's peace, is so interesting when we're talking about insult culture and misogyny. And then
he even says the literal line, like, I hate my job, right? He hates his life. It's bitter
exactly.
man.
So why are you telling her? She's here at work doing her thing. Someone was asking me about that moment recently, and they said, you know, what was she seeing on the screen? It doesn't matter what she's seeing on the screen. The point is that he is behind her and he makes her jump because he keeps talking. And there's this pressure. She's not even looking at the screen because she's just sensing this guy behind her the whole time.
I've seen a few different feminist takes on the show that it sounds like you're not completely aligned with, in the sense that they were talking about.
Are you saying I'm not a feminist, Max?
Bad feminist. That's the title of the episode.
I mean, the fact that I'm even talking to you.
Yeah. Why would you platform a man, Hannah?
Well, don't know. That's a good question.
So, I mean, talking about the fact that it's very much from the boy's perspective.
Right.
We really don't see anything of the victim and the fact that she's not as present as she could have been. Although I did actually think that the fact that the vocals in the score are her singing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she kind of haunts the show in that kind of way, which I thought was an interesting touch that they did.
Very interesting. Yeah, I kind of see the argument, but I don't really agree with it because everything about the show was so intentional. It goes back to the question of what's the point of it? Is the point to look at the victim and what a murder does to a family and what the events were leading up to it? Or is the point so that people start talking about incel culture and start to protect boys from it and talk to boys who are already engaged in it to bring them out of it? I think that's the best way of not combating it, but like it's the best solution is to examine where this is coming from and why it's happening. And I think it's something that has been really lacking and I think it's really important. I guess I'm more aligned with that anyway, because even in going back to House of Bricks, a film about sexual assault, it's not really about the women. It ends up being about them as well. But it was more interesting to me to look at the person doing it as a way of understanding it and then hopefully changing it and mirroring it, because that feels like it's the way that you would get real change, rather than being like, oh, isn't this sad? Which it is. It's horrifying. Yeah. But it's horrifying because we are seeing a human who has done this. And that's why his, you know, that line where he says about thinking that he's ugly, and we've just watched this adorable boy for hours, and the fact that him thinking he's ugly is part of the root of this is so important.
Yeah, and with any piece of media, you have such a narrow light that you're able to shine in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
You have a narrow scope when you're doing something like House of Bricks, a regular feature film. You have an even narrower scope when you're doing a one-shot.
Yeah.
Right? It's so, I mean, I know they did 4 episodes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We got one spotlight.
Exactly. I know they did 4 episodes. They could have expanded in different ways.
I'm so glad they didn't.
I like the way they tackled it. I also like the fact, I heard Jack Thorne talking about this in an interview, that they had very intentionally not made the victim a perfect victim.
Right, because she's, you know, there's these questions around her bullying and that kind of popular girl role, which I also thought was really interesting.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't even begin to excuse what happens to her.
You can be a bully, you can be a complicated, flawed human being and not deserve the kind of treatment that you get from other people. Right? She's not just a bully. She's also the victim of bullying and revenge porn, right?
Yeah.
She's a complicated person, as everyone is. And whenever you paint someone in anything as a perfect character or just a reductive character, it takes away any sense that they are a human being. And it's very common with the fact that you've got Mary Sue and Manic Pixie Dream Girl as things that just drip off my tongue immediately as reductive female characters speaks volumes to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. I think her not being present didn't make her a reductive character. And there's a brilliant line from the psychiatrist who as well, so I think it was Sally was texting me about it and said Anne from The Crown. And I was like, oh my God, that's who it is. I'd completely forgotten that she plays Princess Anne. And after that, yeah, exactly. And after that, I could only refer to her as Anne. But yeah, brilliant. So Anne is where Jamie says something about her, about
Is it Katie?
About Katie, yeah. The psychiatrist just says, well, she can't because she's dead.
Yes.
And I felt like, again, you have a line that explains part of their narrative choice, that she's not there because she's dead. She cannot be there because he has killed her. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't, oh, it's less interesting to have her. It was a choice. And I feel like that is merited.
Yeah, and we're barreling forwards. We're not going backwards.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The other element of the Jack Thorne interview that I thought was really interesting to take away was that he'd mentioned, having watched back the show, that the Jade character, the best friend of Katie that we explore a bit in episode 2, was a character that he felt that he could have and maybe should have expanded upon a bit more, because she was really captivating, right? The actress was fantastic.
Yeah, and her position in the narrative.
Yeah. The actress knows Fatima Bojang as well. She's big things for her.
Yeah, brilliant. There's something interesting there as well about, you said about shining a spotlight on a particular theme or subject or moment or character within a film, but also the act of making a film, the very long, hard, drawn out act of making a film, is going to change the way that you feel about a subject. And so I think there's always going to be a moment where it's finally done. It doesn't belong to you anymore. It's that, you're getting audience feedback, and you might see it in a different light and see, oh yeah, actually this character that we weren't thinking about that much because of thinking about all these other things that we were trying to do in one shot. And maybe that would be something that we should have explored more. But I think you can do that to infinity, right? So I think that second episode could have done with more of that. Is true. I do think that second episode would have benefited to have had more time with Jade, because she's also there at the end just waiting, and you're kind of like, why are we with her again?
Yeah. We see her in the car park at the end, you mean? Yeah.
I was looking up a couple of interviews. Owen Cooper is talking about how the yawn in that episode was him yawning. He's actually yawning and trying to stifle the yawn. And then her line, "Am I boring you?" is improvised, and then he improvises around it. But you see this little smirk, and that smirk was so good watching it, because you get this insolence and superiority from it.
Oh, he was deep in character, yeah.
But then he talks about it and he's like, yeah, I was smiling because I didn't expect her to say that. But then you can see him burying it, and it works so well for the character. And it reminded me of one film we haven't even spoken about, which is Victoria.
Oh, I haven't seen Victoria.
Oh, Victoria is fantastic. I don't want to talk too much about the plot because I went into it not knowing anything about it.
Which Victoria are we talking about?
Well, this is the thing. I went into it knowing that it was a one shot and thinking it was about Queen Victoria, and it is not.
Oh, okay. That was my immediate assumption.
Yeah, no. It's a Spanish girl living in Berlin, and we join her like 2-3 in the morning, and then it's the next 2 hours of her life, and it's so good. Okay. And there's a point, they only had something like 4 pages of script, and the rest was improvised. So they had beats to hit.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a 2.5 hour film as well.
Yeah, I mean, they had like, here's a scene where this happens, and here's a scene where this happens, but it was the characters are, the cast are improvising the dialogue, and there's a point near the beginning where one of the other cast members slips up. He says the wrong word, but because they're all speaking their second language, which is English, they pass it off, and they're kind of, it works for the scene because they're a bit nervous, and he's like, oh, do you want to go to this place? But he says the wrong thing. And then when they end up going to that place later, I was like, oh, that's why he said that word. And that nervousness is real, because they're like, oh shit, we might have fucked it up. And then also there's a scene later on where
it spoils the ending in the one shot.
I know, exactly, but it works. It works so well, because it's just, he just passes it off as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. And she offers it to him. And then there's a very tense moment much later on, and the camera, they're in a car, and the camera lies down in the car, so it's really low, and they're all shouting, and they've gone,
did they drop it?
No, but they drove the wrong way, so they were going to see the crew.
Oh.
And so they are genuinely shouting, you're going the wrong way, which works for the scene. Perfect, so it's brilliant. Right. But it was the cameraman who improvised and just was like, I'm just going to get on the floor.
Oh, that's so smart.
And then I can't see it.
Yeah. Anyone that has made any of these films, it is unbelievably to be commended for going through the pain of doing this, because it is so unbelievably technically impressive.
I mean, the number of shots that we did in House of Bricks that were we did single take scenes. Yeah. That when it came to the edit, I then cut up, and I have never fully apologized to Nick Gavin, DOP, for putting him through that. But yeah, we had entire scenes where a cast of 12 would enter a room individually and have conversations, and then we would pull in on this monologue and
someone
pull out
slips
again,
on a
like, the whole
banana
scene.
skin and then you got to do
Honestly,
it again.
I mean,
like,
you've seen the film, you know that's the tone. But yeah, just the technicality of getting, you know, the living room scene where you've got 5 different conversations happening from the very beginning, you know, from rehearsals and blocking, making sure that each of those conversations are timed correctly so that the person arrives at the right moment, and having the camera in the right place so that all the shots line up. But also, where's your sound guy? Poor Josh Holloway with his boom, like, where can I stand? And I'm like, I don't know. Where do you think you can stand?
Well, I think that was another thing with Russian Ark, is that they did a fair amount, to the best of my understanding, of post-production editing out cables and things.
Yeah, you kind of have to do that.
There's always going to be an element of that you're going to have to be doing. But I think it sounds like Russian Ark, 2002, doing it as a one-shot in the way that they're doing it, janky technology.
Yeah.
They were pioneering doing this rather than it being a final thought, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I do have a game for you.
Oh, is it 6 Degrees with Nicholas Hoult, or is it something different?
It's a new one. We've talked about a lot of films, the entire film is a single take, but there are a lot of films that have famously long takes within them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know one off the top of my head, but go on.
Maybe that one will turn up in this game. So basically what I've done is I've taken quotes from those scenes and you have to guess the film.
Shit.
But I was careful. I picked films that I'm pretty sure you've seen, because there were some that I've seen that I know you haven't. So I was like, there's no point doing that. And then there's actually a couple on here that I haven't seen, but I think you probably have.
Okay.
So I've got 3 quotes from each. So I'll start with a hard one and work up to like the giveaway.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Okay, so quite an easy one to start with. That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message.
Oh my God.
The next one is going to give it away a bit more.
Go for the next one, yeah.
I'm not going to waste my time talking to a man who's lining up to be a hot lunch.
Oh my God, what is this? No. This is not ringing a bell at all. Third
one. You open the beaches on the 4th of July. It's like ringing the dinner bell, for Christ's sake.
Wait, what was the first quote?
That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message.
And this isn't Jaws.
It is Jaws, yeah.
Oh,
It's so hard to find a quote that didn't have anything about like the anatomy of a shark.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not the best on quotes necessarily, but also I think Jaws is one of those films which, like, I've seen Jaws, but I've seen it once in not like my childhood. Like it's not one that I grew up with at all. So
Excuses.
I mean, classic.
Excuses.
I mean, I know I got it. I did get it. And so I won the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, there's like 10 of these. So.
Oh, Jesus.
And you can also just say when you want to stop.
Sure.
Okay. Wow, I almost read out the title then. So the first quote, she's bleeding everywhere.
Okay, next one.
Where are we? Canterbury, we're close.
Canterbury. Go for the third one.
So what did you do? Rob a train, blow up a building, leave the girl alone. This is one of the most famous long takes of recent times.
Of recent times?
Fairly recent, yeah. It's a famous clip.
My initial impulse was something like Edgar Wright, but I don't think
No,
it is.
It's not Edgar Wright.
No, what is it?
It's Children of Men.
Oh, that is one of the most famous long takes. And I have seen that film.
It is, yeah. It's okay. Oh. So 1 for 1. Okay. This is also a famous one, and I will be disappointed if you don't get it. So more pressure. So the first one, you're leaving your car?
Okay. It's not Dude, Where's My Car?
It's not, no. Every time I come here, every time you two, don't you work?
Oh, that's familiar.
Might have been the performance.
Yeah. No, okay, what's the third one?
What do you do? I'm in construction.
Oh, it's Goodfellas.
Yes.
Yeah. I got it, yeah.
Okay. This one, these are literally the only 3 lines in the entire shot, and the shot is like 5 minutes long.
Oh, okay.
Let's go upstairs. Okay. Is the first one. This is an old film, a very old film.
Let's go upstairs. Okay. Okay, next.
And then a couple of minutes later, I gotta go. Will you call me tomorrow?
Oh. Okay. Well, yeah, what's the third one?
Michael?
Very helpful.
Well, that's the character.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this one.
Shit, no. I don't got it.
It's the original Halloween.
Oh, I have seen that. Yeah. I have seen that. I've seen so many Halloween films. Alana loves them. Yeah. Okay, I should have got that one, yeah.
Do you want to keep going?
Let's do one more.
This one, I'm pretty sure you've seen, but I'm not sure if you're going to get it. Okay, first one. All right, boy, it was a nightmare, but it's over now. We have had this director already.
Okay, what's the next one?
What happened out there, mister? Can I use your men's room, please?
Can I use your men's room, please? Okay.
You just go along thinking some things don't change ever, like being able to drive on a public highway without somebody trying to murder you.
Oh, is it Death Proof?
No, it's Jewel.
Ow!
This is to get you back for all the Nick Holtz that I was unprepared for.
Yeah. So that was, what was that, 2 out of 6? Oh, God.
I did expect you to get Jewel.
I've not seen Jewel for a long time. I have seen Jewel at some stage, but I tend to remember like big narrative beats from films more than individual lines.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm the opposite, I think. I remember details.
Yeah, I'm terrible with detail. I used to watch long-running science fiction shows, so like Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, all those sorts of shows, and I just absolutely chained through it. I wasn't so much interested in like what was going on week to week necessarily. The thing that my brain was keyed into is like, what's the big overarching narrative doing? So I'm not great when it comes to quotes, obviously, but
I mean,
yeah,
proven.
Asked and answered. Yeah,
I didn't know that quotes weren't your strong point. I would have made them easier. Live and learn.
Yeah. Until next time. Is that a quote from something? It is now.